I came home at 11 p.m. after a 12-hour shift to find my wife sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop closed and her hands folded like she was about to fire me. I should have known right then. The house was too quiet. The lights were dimmed in that specific way she does when she's rehearsed something serious. And there was this energy in the air that felt like standing on train tracks. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and asked if everything was okay. She smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile people give you right before they destroy your life. She told me we needed to talk, and those 4 words hit different when your wife says them at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I sat down across from her and waited. She took a breath, pushed her hair behind her ear, and dropped the bomb. She needed me to let her sleep with Asher, her ex-boyfriend from college. Just like that, no build-up, no cushion, just straight to the throat. I blinked. I actually laughed for a second because I thought maybe she was joking, maybe this was some weird test or prank, but her face didn't change. She was dead serious. Then she added the kicker: if I couldn't handle that, then I needed to just stay out of her way because she was going to do it anyway. I sat there staring at her, trying to process what I was hearing. This was my wife of 6 years, the woman I bought a house with, the woman I trusted with everything. And now she was sitting across from me telling me she wanted to sleep with her ex-boyfriend like it was a completely reasonable request. I asked her if she was serious. She nodded and told me she'd been thinking about this for months. She went into this whole speech about how monogamy is just a social construct, how it's not natural, and how she'd been suffocating in our relationship because I wasn't willing to grow with her. I remember just staring at her because the words coming out of her mouth sounded like they came from a podcast or some self-help guru she'd been listening to. She kept going, explaining that this wasn't cheating because she was being honest with me, giving me the choice to be part of this journey with her or to step aside, but either way she needed this. She said it so calmly, like she was explaining why she wanted to repaint the living room. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't storm out. I just looked at her and smiled. I told her I needed some time to think about it. She seemed relieved, like she'd expected me to explode, and was glad I was being mature about it. She even reached across the table and touched my hand, thanking me for hearing her. I pulled my hand back slowly and told her I was going to bed. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over, trying to figure out where this came from, how long she'd been planning this, and most importantly, what the hell I was going to do about it. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and told me to have a good day at work. Over the next week, she started sending me podcast episodes about open relationships and ethical non-monogamy. She'd text me articles with titles like Why Modern Love Requires Flexibility and Breaking Free from Outdated Relationship Models. I played along. I listened to the podcasts on my commute. I read the articles. I even told her I was trying to understand her perspective. She ate it up. She thought I was actually considering it, that I was going to be the enlightened husband who lets his wife explore her needs. But the whole time I was watching her, I was paying attention to everything. One night, she left her iPad on the couch while she was in the shower. I opened it. No passcode. The calendar app was right there on the screen. I scrolled through it and found entries labeled Asher's Loft going back for months. For months. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Sometimes weekend afternoons. I opened her messages. The thread with Asher was pages long. They weren't just planning meetups. They were talking about me, about how I didn't understand her, about how she'd been unhappy for years but stayed because she felt obligated. There were voice memos too. I listened to one where she told him she couldn't wait to finally be free to see him openly. Then I found something that made my blood go cold. Messages between her and her sister Tori. Tori was apparently also involved with Asher. They were comparing notes like this was some kind of game. I took screenshots of everything. I didn't confront her. I didn't even let on that I knew. I just saved it all to a cloud folder and kept playing the role of the husband who was trying to be open-minded. The next day, I called my buddy Ally and told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I was done, he told me I needed to document everything and get strategic. I told him I wasn't going to get emotional about this. I was going to be calculated. I started keeping a journal, logging every conversation, every lie, every inconsistency in her story. I backed up every message, every photo, every piece of evidence I could find. I was building a case, and she had no idea. 2 weeks after the kitchen table conversation, Celeste came to me and announced she'd made her decision. She was going to see Asher that weekend whether I was okay with it or not. I nodded. I told her I understood that she needed to do what was right for her. She looked shocked that I wasn't fighting her on it. She actually hugged me and said I was being so mature about this. I hugged her back and said nothing. That weekend while she was at Asher's loft, I met with a lawyer. I brought all the screenshots, all the messages, all the evidence I'd been collecting. The lawyer looked through it, looked up at me, and smiled. He asked if I had a prenup. I nodded. He asked if it had an infidelity clause. I nodded again. He leaned back in his chair and told me I was about to own everything. She thought I had two choices. She didn't know I'd already picked option 3. The prenup was ironclad. I'd actually forgotten about the infidelity clause until the lawyer pointed it out. We'd signed it 3 years into the marriage when we bought the house together, and buried in Section 7.3 was a paragraph that basically said if either of us cheated, the other person got everything. House, cars, furniture, savings, all of it. The cheater walked away with whatever they brought into the marriage, which in Celeste's case was a Toyota Camry with a dented bumper and about $3,000 in credit card debt. My lawyer looked at the evidence I'd brought and said this was the cleanest case he'd seen in 15 years. She'd documented her own affair. She'd made our job easy. We spent 2 hours going over strategy. He told me not to tip my hand, not to let her know I was planning anything, and to keep collecting evidence until we were ready to file. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. I called Ally that night and told him everything. He was at my house within an hour with a bottle of whiskey and a laptop. He told me we were going scorched earth. I told him I wanted to be smart about this, not emotional. He agreed, but said that didn't mean we couldn't have a little fun with Asher. Ally's a software engineer, the kind of guy who can make your life digital hell if he wants to. He asked me for Asher's full name and business info. Turns out Asher ran some kind of life coaching business out of his loft. One of those guys who charges lonely people $900 for a course on finding their authentic self. Ally pulled up his website and started laughing. He told me this guy was a fraud, that half the testimonials were stock photos. We spent the next hour doing what Ally called a digital audit. He created fake Google reviews for Asher's business. All 1 star, all vague enough to be believable. Took my money and ghosted me. Predatory behavior, avoid at all costs. This man is not who he says he is. Then Ally subscribed Asher's email to every spam list he could find. Scientology, timeshares, multi-level marketing schemes, erectile dysfunction pills, everything. The final touch was signing Asher up for his own $900 course using a prepaid debit card. Ally said we'd let him deal with refunding himself. We were laughing by the end of it, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like I was winning. But I wasn't done with Asher yet. I did some digging and found out he had a girlfriend. Her name was Haley, and she had no idea what he was doing. I found her on social media, sent her a message, and asked if we could talk. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop the next day. When I showed her the screenshots of Asher's messages with Celeste, and then the ones with Tori, her face went white. She asked how long. I told her at least 4 months that I knew of, probably longer. She started crying right there in the coffee shop. I felt bad for her, but I also knew she could help me. I told her I wasn't trying to ruin her life. I just thought she deserved to know the truth. She thanked me, said she needed time to process, and left. 2 days later, Asher's business Instagram went private and his website went offline. Haley had gone nuclear on him. She posted in every local wellness group he was part of, every networking circle, every community forum. She didn't name names, but she described exactly what he'd done, and people connected the dots. His reputation was cooked. Meanwhile, Celeste was planning a spiritual retreat with Asher. She told me it was a solo trip to reconnect with herself. I smiled and told her I thought that sounded healthy. She left on a Friday morning with a suitcase and a yoga mat. The second her car was out of the driveway, I called Ally. We spent the entire weekend packing her stuff. Clothes, books, personal items, everything that was clearly hers. I didn't touch anything that could be considered joint property. I wasn't stupid. We boxed it all up, labeled it, and stacked it neatly in the garage. Then we rearranged the furniture. I moved my stuff into what used to be our spaces. I put my books on her side of the shelf, my clothes in her half of the closet. I wasn't erasing her. I was just making it clear that this was my house now. Sunday afternoon, I had the locks changed. New deadbolt, new door handle, new garage code. I kept one of her boxes by the front door so she'd have access to essentials, but that was it. Monday morning, I filed for divorce. My lawyer had the papers ready to go. We cited irreconcilable differences and attached a thick folder of evidence supporting the infidelity clause. By Monday afternoon, the papers were filed with the court. By Tuesday morning, a process server was assigned to deliver them. I asked my lawyer when she'd be served. He told me probably Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when the server could catch her. I told him to make it happen at her parents' house. I wanted an audience. Celeste came home from her retreat on Tuesday evening. She pulled into the driveway, grabbed her suitcase, and walked up to the front door. I watched from the living room window as she tried her key. It didn't work. She tried it again. Nothing. I saw the confusion on her face turn to panic. She knocked. I didn't answer. She called my phone. I didn't pick up. She knocked harder. I waited 5 minutes. Then I opened the door, but left the chain lock on. She asked what was going on. I told her she'd find out soon enough. She asked if I was seriously locking her out of her own house. I told her it wasn't her house anymore. She could pick up her essentials from the box on the porch and the rest of her stuff was in the garage, but she wasn't coming inside. She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. She demanded I let her in. I told her to call her parents or call Asher. I didn't care, but she wasn't staying here. Then I closed the door. I heard her standing there for another 10 minutes. She called my phone 6 more times. She pounded on the door. She yelled that I couldn't do this, that this was illegal, that she'd call the cops. I didn't respond. Eventually, I heard her car start and she left. I texted my lawyer and told him what happened. He said to document everything, keep records of every attempt she made to contact me, and not to engage with her until after she was served. The next day, she showed up at her parents' house. That's where the process server found her. He handed her the divorce papers in front of her mom, her dad, and her sister Tori. My lawyer told me later that she'd broken down crying on the spot, that she'd tried to refuse the papers, but the server left them anyway. Her mom called me that night. She was furious. She asked how I could do this to her daughter, how I could throw away 6 years of marriage without even trying to work it out. I told her to ask Celeste about Asher. Then I hung up. Celeste lawyered up within 2 days. She hired someone local, someone who probably charged her $300 an hour to tell her she had no case. My lawyer called me a week later and said her attorney had reached out asking if we could negotiate. I asked what they were offering. He said they wanted to keep the house and split everything 50-50. I laughed. I told him to remind her attorney about the infidelity clause and the evidence we had. He did. Her lawyer went quiet for 3 days. When he finally responded, he asked if we'd accept her keeping the car and her personal belongings. My lawyer told him that was already the deal. She wasn't getting anything else. The next time I heard from Celeste directly was 2 weeks later. She sent me a long text message. She said she was sorry, that she didn't mean for things to go this way, that she'd made a mistake, and she wanted to talk. I didn't respond. She sent another text an hour later. She said she still loved me, that Asher meant nothing, that she'd been confused and she wanted to fix this. I blocked her number. The papers were signed. The house was mine. The clock was ticking, and Celeste had no idea how much worse it would get. Celeste's lawyer tried everything. He filed motions, requested mediation, argued that the infidelity clause was too harsh and should be thrown out. My lawyer shut down every single attempt. The evidence was overwhelming. For months of documented messages, calendar entries, voice memos, all of it time-stamped and saved. Her lawyer had nothing to work with. Every time he tried to negotiate, my lawyer would pull out another piece of evidence. The messages where she told Asher she hadn't loved me in years. The voice memo where she laughed about how clueless I was. The text with her sister comparing notes about sleeping with the same guy. It was brutal and it was airtight. By week 3, her lawyer stopped returning calls. By week 4, he withdrew from the case entirely. Celeste had to find new representation, which cost her even more money she didn't have. But the real explosion happened at her parents' house. Her mom had been calling me nonstop, trying to get me to agree to a family meeting. She said we needed to talk this through like adults, that divorce was too extreme, that every marriage has rough patches. I ignored her for 2 weeks. Then Celeste's dad called. He was calmer, more reasonable. He said he just wanted to understand what happened, that he wasn't taking sides. I knew that was garbage, but I agreed to meet. I showed up at their house on a Saturday afternoon with a folder full of printed evidence. Her whole family was there. Mom, Dad, Tori, and Celeste. They were all sitting in the living room like this was some kind of intervention. Celeste's mom started immediately. She told me I was being cruel, that I was destroying their daughter over a mistake, that marriage meant forgiveness. I didn't say anything. I just opened the folder and started reading. I read the messages where Celeste told Asher she'd been planning this for months. I read the text where she called me boring and emotionally unavailable. I read the voice memo where she said she was only staying with me until she figured out her exit strategy. The room went silent. Celeste's face was bright red. Her mom looked like she'd been slapped. Her dad just stared at the floor. Then I pulled out the screenshots of Tori's messages with Asher. I didn't even have to read them out loud. I just laid them on the coffee table and let everyone see. Tori went pale. She started to say something, but nothing came out. Her mom picked up one of the screenshots and read it. Then she looked at Tori with this expression I'll never forget. Pure disgust. Celeste's dad asked if this was real. I told him it was all real. That both of his daughters had been involved with the same man, and that Celeste had known about it the whole time. Celeste started crying. She said I was twisting everything, that it wasn't how it looked, that I was being vindictive. I asked her which part one was twisting. She didn't answer. I stood up, told them they could keep the printouts, and walked out. As I reached the door, I turned back and said one thing. She gave me two choices. I picked option 3. Then I left. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I got the house, the cars, all the furniture, and the joint savings account. Celeste got her Camry and her debt. She moved back in with her parents because she couldn't afford rent anywhere else. Asher had already moved to Arizona to escape the fallout. Between Haley's public takedown and Ally's digital sabotage, his life coaching business was completely destroyed. The fake 1-star reviews were still showing up at the top of his Google results. His email was permanently buried under spam, and anyone who searched his name found nothing but red flags. His Instagram never came back, his website stayed offline, and his reputation in the local wellness community was annihilated. Haley had made sure everyone knew what kind of person he really was, and Ally had made sure the internet would never let him forget it. I heard through Ally that Celeste tried to contact Asher after the divorce, but he blocked her. Turns out he'd only been interested when it was exciting and forbidden. Once it cost him everything, he wanted nothing to do with her. Tori stopped speaking to Celeste entirely. Their parents were furious with both of them, but especially with Tori for betraying her sister. The family fractured. Celeste's mom called me one more time about 3 months after the divorce was final. She apologized. She said she didn't know the full story when she defended Celeste, that she was horrified by what her daughters had done, and that she understood why I'd left. I told her I appreciated that, but I'd already moved on. She asked if there was any chance Celeste and I could ever reconcile. I told her no. She thanked me for being honest and hung up. The last time I saw Celeste was in October, about 6 months after everything was finalized. She showed up at my house drunk at 11 p.m. on a weeknight. I opened the door because I thought something was wrong. She was crying, mascara running down her face, slurring her words. She told me her life was ruined, that she'd lost everything, that she had no friends left, and her family barely spoke to her. She asked if we could try again, if I could forgive her, if there was any way to fix what she'd broken. I asked her if she regretted what she did. She said yes. I asked her what she regretted specifically. She said she regretted losing me, losing the house, losing her life. I told her that wasn't the same as regretting what she did. She looked confused. I explained that she didn't regret sleeping with Asher or lying to me for 4 months or planning to use me as a safety net while she explored her options. She regretted the consequences. She regretted getting caught. She started crying harder and told me that wasn't fair. I told her life wasn't fair and closed the door. She sat in her car in my driveway for 20 minutes. Eventually, her mom came and picked her up. I haven't heard from her since. Ally came over that night, and we played video games and drank beer until 3 a.m. like nothing had happened. Because for me, nothing had. Celeste became exactly what she always should have been. A forgotten story I used to know. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.